For weeks, political divisions in Kenya have been on open display, as opposition supporters called for electoral reform ahead of the second presidential election this year. But Kenya is now heading into uncharted political waters, and it took less than 24 hours to get there. First, Kenyan opposition leader Raila Odinga formally withdrew from the race because he said the Election Commission had failed to make vital changes to ensure a free and fair election.
All indications are that the election scheduled for 26th of October will be worse than the previous one.
The incumbent, President Uhuru Kenyatta, then pledged to go ahead with the poll anyway.
So, my friend,
I hear now that you have withdrawn after taking us round and round, having spent more than 10 billion Kenya shillings so that we can go for an election. Money we could have built roads, money we could have used to build hospitals, now is being used for an election that he called for. But now he says he does not want. Is there justice there?
Parliament has also just passed an amendment that if one candidate withdraws from a repeat presidential election, the other candidate automatically wins. The president will have to sign it for the law to take effect. But in another twist, Kenya's High Court has directed the Election Commission to include a fringe candidate who previously ran if there is a repeat election. That's Uhuru Kenyatta, who won less than 1% of votes in the August elections. Kenya made history this year after the Supreme Court nullified the results of the August presidential election over irregularities. Will its people be in a position to shape the next chapter in the country's political future with an electoral process that's now in turmoil? Natalie Pohonen, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Nairobi is Kimani Ichung'wah. He's a member of the Kenyan Parliament. Also from Nairobi is Farah Maalim. He's the former Deputy Speaker of the Kenyan National Parliament and an opposition party politician. And in London, we have Agnes Gitau. She's the director of GBS Africa, an advisory firm working to promote business and investment in the continent. Thank you all for joining us. Let me begin with you, Farah Maalim. Why is Raila Odinga boycotting this vote on October 26th?
Well, he believes that the systemic flaws or the systemic problems that the IEBC had in the last election have not been addressed yet. They were the minimum irreducible conditions that was advanced by Raila Odinga through NASA. And I think the period to address that was too short. I don't think that could have been addressed in 60 days because the Supreme Court found the IEBC having had illegalities and irregularities. But because they were not able to pinpoint specific officers or specific departments, and they said it is a systemic. When somebody tells you it's systemic, it means the whole system is flawed. Right. So the idea was to correct the system, and it cannot be corrected in the given period of time. And you can also follow the fact that within the IEBC, there has been a lot of internal conflicts when everybody was trying to blame everybody else. So he says the system has not been corrected, and he doesn't want to go for elections when the same system that was there before is what obtains today.
Right, so Kimani Ichung'wah, they're saying no reform, no elections, and they're pointing to the fact that they feel the electoral law amendments proposed by the ruling party have created deeper and wider divisions within the IEBC, the Electoral Council. They feel as if they're being set up to fail and that the second time round it's going to be rigged. What's your response to that?
I think far from what my good friend Farah Maalim says. They are not boycotting this election because of any systemic failures in the process or in the electoral system. Because those systemic failures are some of what is being sorted through the electoral amendments that we have proposed on the floor of Parliament. They are abandoning this election because they knew they were going to lose this election. From the beginning, even the August 8th election, they never wanted to go into elections. They tried through the court system, through our judicial system, by filing a myriad of court cases, almost about close to 100 cases that were filed in court, all to create hurdles towards the holding of a free, fair, and credible election on August 8th. They do know that they lost in that election. They do know also, as a matter of fact, that they will lose in the election that is slated for the 26th. And therefore, their running away is basically just trying to save themselves from the humiliating defeat they would have suffered. I think for those who have been observing what has been happening in the last 1 month or so, since the nullification of the results, we did say that we disagreed with the court's decision, but we respected that decision. We hit back to the campaign trail, continued selling our agenda to the people. What ODM and the NASA coalition did was to go back to their drawing board, and they realized they cannot in any way be able to claw back on the numbers, the difference in numbers that our coalition had in the last election. And therefore, they made a conscious decision to not to have these elections in an effort to try and force us into a negotiating table to negotiate themselves into government in an extra legal and an extra constitutional way.
Okay, Kimani, we got your perspective. Agnes Gitau, from your vantage point, which one of the two gentlemen is closer to the truth?
I'll be wrong to say who is right and who is wrong, but that's the situation in Kenya. Everybody is translating the latest move by Honorable Raila Odinga to how it suits them. So both parties, we have two camps. One saying, look, there is no need of running an election if the issues that were highlighted have not been rectified. And the other camp is saying, look, you know, we've spent a lot of money. It's costly to a very young economy like Kenya. Why would you want to withdraw this last minute? So both camps have their own arguments. But I think the most important thing to note is, you know, Kenya is bigger than politicians. We need to ensure that politicians are very careful in their rhetorics, because the impact it has on both the domestic and international investment is huge. And suddenly the uncertainty we are currently experiencing is not good for the country. And I think the political class must start it's not negotiating to have the opposition in government. No, it's what is best for Kenya, and how do we sit down as mature people and resolve this to move the country forward.
Right. Farah, help me understand this. So you have the Supreme Court ruling in Odinga's favor. You have the entire international community in support of this as a great democratic exercise, the fact that the Supreme Court can come in, annul the election and call for a new election. So Odinga had the momentum with him. Can you honestly tell me that he thought that Kenyatta is going to rig this second round with the entire world watching?
You see, the entire world is not going to conduct the elections. You see, the elections, they are servers, they are election materials that were used to conduct the elections last time. It is those election materials and the people who were manning it that time, people who conducted the election, who were culpable for the mistakes that were highlighted by the Supreme Court. Now, when the Supreme Court says there are systemic flaws, illegalities and irregularities in the system itself, and then you ask these people, or you ask NASA to go back to the same elections 60 days later without correcting that mischief, the problem was there. You must correct the problem so that you can have a free, fair, credible, and transparent elections. And that is where the crux of the matter is. I don't know who is going to win and who is going to lose. I mean, everybody would want to say their candidate is going to win or their candidate is not going to lose. But the issue is, if you're so confident that your candidate is going to win and he has the advantages of the incumbency, why not correct the system that was seen to be flawed? The process was flawed. The results were flawed. The product was flawed. Why do you then get scared of getting this system sorted out?
Okay, so Kimani,
that is the crux of the matter.
Let's pose that to Kimani. Let's pose it to Kimani. Why not make some tweaks? Why not meet them halfway and make some tweaks to the system so they can feel happy to participate in the process?
Let me say this, and you hear the dishonesty in Honorable Farah when he says that we have refused. We haven't refused. In fact, we are the only people who have taken steps within the legal and constitutional institutions created under our constitution, and that is Parliament and the Independent Electoral Commission, to sort out the systemic problems that are pointed out by the Supreme Court. Our friends on the other side, what they have done, they have not even addressed themselves to the systemic problems. They have narrowed down their problems to demanding the exit of particular officers of the Electoral Commission, particular commissioners who they think probably do not sing to their song, or those they feel that they probably may not be able to intimidate. They have demanded that we change the service providers, those who are printing the ballot papers, those who are providing the IT system that the electoral process in terms of identification and transmission of voter results is running on. And a myriad of other things that they knew practically were not possible to be done within the period given by the Supreme Court of 60 days. And let me be quick to point out, it is not a period that was just given by the Supreme Court. It is a constitutional requirement that a fresh election must be held within a period of 60 days. Therefore, what NASA have been trying to do is to create hurdles to make sure that we do not have an election or before or not before the 60th day, and therefore precipitate what they imagined will be a constitutional crisis. This afternoon, I can tell you, somebody has already gone to court asking, and some of the people who support them in civil society, asking the court to declare, to form a caretaker government. And that is an agenda that the NASA coalition have been trying to push. Okay. Well, for us, we have been very systematic. We have insisted on following the rule of law and the Constitution as it is.
Okay, Kimani. So, Farah, do you want a caretaker government?
Look, the problem is very simple. If you have a contest and there's a referee, and one of the contestants is not confident, not comfortable with that referee, and sees the referee as being partisan, and the other side, which is the Chungwa side, is so confident that regardless of who comes in, even if there's a level playing field, they will win. Then it's only fair that you say, okay, you're not comfortable with this referee. How can we get a referee that we can both be comfortable with? And that's it. It's not rocket science. It's not such a big issue. And then you go back again and use your tyranny of numbers in Parliament to make it to make it so easier right now, legally, that they can do the same flawed thing, but this time it's not going to be flawed because there's a law that provides for it, and that says the manual counting system is going to supersede, is going to be superior to the digital one. I mean, this is the problem we have gone through this country for far too many years.
So hold on.
I can tell you
okay, so before you come in, Kimani, Agnes, let me ask you, as things stand, so we have Kenyatta saying, quote, if you do not want elections, step aside so that the country can move forward. So you have Kenyatta wanting to move forward, Odinga boycotting. We have this kind of deadlock before October 26th. It will probably go ahead, and we're hearing that the election board could include Ekuru Aukot, who polled less than 1% the first time round. So this becomes a big joke, doesn't it? Because it doesn't become an election, does it, Agnes?
Absolutely. It's chaotic, and it's very unfortunate just listening to both Maalim and Honorable Kimani that we're talking about us and them. I mean, I just want to clearly say there is no us and them. It's a country. And Kenya right now, it's a laughingstock. You know, I mean, everybody says in the long term for the democratic process to take place, this is a positive. The movements are saying in Kenya is positive, but certainly not. It's chaotic. And the people who are in leadership position must bring this to order. And I highly doubt the election will take place on the 26th of October because, you know, the withdrawal of Honorable Raila Odinga, as he had been requested by the President Uhuru Kenyatta, has thrown us into a chaotic situation. To be honest with you, I do not know what the future holds for the country. I think, and I think peace-loving Kenyans are watching closely, and hopefully that the politicians can just get mature and have a conversation and guide us to the way forward.
Let me ask you, Kimani, would you be comfortable with an election where your candidate runs against a guy who less than 1% of Kenyans actually support? Would you consider that a proper election?
Let me first, because I'm in Nairobi, bring you up to speed on what is happening. This morning, the High Court in Nairobi did rule that, in fact, all the other 8 candidates who are on the ballot at liberty to be on the ballot. And therefore, I'm looking at a situation where probably IEBC will allow, because the court did rule that there is no reason at all to disallow any of the candidates who ran in the August 8th
But
election.
not a single one of them has the power or appeal of Odinga, right? Realistically speaking, when we look at the political system and we look at who has political momentum, not a single one of them has the power of Odinga. So essentially, you have Kenyatta, who's a Goliath versus a bunch of political midgets in an election. How is that an election?
Let me say, our country, unlike countries like Australia, our country, voting and being on the ballot paper is not compulsory for anybody. And therefore, it is within, and Raila Odinga himself has said, it is within his democratic right to choose whether to go into an election or not. To begin with, the August 8th election, for us, we have maintained that we want their issues to do with even the nullification of the Supreme Court, which we have said we will revisit after we are done with the election, because there were issues even within the petition itself and how documents were handled at the registrar of the Supreme Court in terms of the report that the judges relied on. But let me say this in regard to what Gitao is saying, that we are becoming a laughingstock. Yes, indeed, we would become a laughingstock if we were to abrogate our constitution and put it aside and start negotiating for what they want, the caretaker governments they want, and those other means that would be unconstitutional of getting into government other than through the ballot. I would have encouraged, and I was looking forward to a situation where we will, on the ballot, humiliate Raila Odinga and the NASA coalition by proving to him and proving to the world that indeed President Uhuru Kenyatta won with an overwhelming majority of over 8.2 million votes. 1.5 million votes above what Raila Odinga had. Okay. I was looking forward to a situation on the 26th of October where probably would have had a margin of another 3 to 4 million votes.
Fair enough, and it's not happening now. Farah Maalim, let me ask you about the responsibility that Raila has when it comes to what people might do on the streets. 2007 is a ghost that hangs over the memory of the country. On the continent and around the world, people look at the country. More than 1,200 people were killed. It descended from political violence into ethnic violence. It got terrible and atrocious and disgusting. Doesn't Raila, even if you truly believe he's technically right in this conversation, if you believe that there are systemic issues here, doesn't he have a responsibility to consider that the boycott might lead to violence?
Let me tell you something. To be fair to everybody and to be fair to some of the founding fathers of this country, other than the presidential elections, the last time we had a free and fair elections is in 1974, when this was still under the first Kenyatta. The first Kenyatta, who was the first president of this country, did not accommodate anybody running against him. He was always a sole candidate for the presidency. But for every other seat, he never allowed any rigging to take place. We have had an impunity of rigging from the first one, which was under Moi in 79, until the last one yesterday. So what Raila says is that, look, what's the point of having a democracy if we cannot have it free, fair, credible, and transparent? If there's every time going to be one form of rigging or the other, everybody knows who won in 2007. I come from the northeastern part of this country. I'm not from Central Province, and I'm not from the lakeside where Raila comes from. And I'm looking at this thing from a very impartial, non-partisan, but straight in a patriotic manner. We need to bring a close to the impunities in electoral rigging in this country and in the continent of Africa, all of it. So it's only because of that. I think this decision right now to boycott this election is not geared towards any violence. It's geared, and by the way, when there was violence in 2007, hang on a minute. When we had a violence in 2007, not Raila or Kibaki or anybody else was there as been seen as culpable. The people who were seen that time and who basically later on were vindicated by the courts, the international ICC, were not any of them. The point I'm trying to tell you is that the country deserves, Kenyans deserve a free, fair, and credible elections. I think Uhuru has the advantage of incumbency, and it's possible that he's going to win the elections. Why not just have a free, fair, credible and transparent
and
elections.
That's the point at which you
Only
all disagree.
once.
Certainly, Farah. Kimani Ichung'wah, Farah Maalim and Agnes Gitau. Unfortunately, I've got to move on. But it's been a pleasure listening to all your opinions. Good to get your opinions, your passion. It's a testing time for Kenya. I appreciate you all coming on the Newsmakers to join us for the conversation. Thanks so much.